G'day everyone, welcome back to the Beginner Progression series. Today we are up to episode 4 and we have finally moved on to farming the rune dungeons. So let's talk about some of the steps we got to get to where we are now. The first thing we did was on day 1 we started setting up all the units that we wanted to use on the account. We built our farmer and pretty much skilled everything up. The next step we moved on to was we went and started farming the elemental rifts for the purpose of building the Homunculus. Now, the Homunculus is super important for this team. He provides a safety net, which is kind of necessary for making a semi-fast beginners team for Giants Abyss. This is actually quite important as Giants is by far the best dungeon to farm, and we're going to get way more progression in the early game by moving into this dungeon as soon as possible. Let's quickly do a rundown of the 2As that we required to get to this point exactly. The first unit I do recommend everyone to 2A is Crow. He's going to be very, very useful for getting your triple S in the elemental rifts. The next unit you should focus on is probably Naomi. She also can be used in some of the elemental rifts just to boost your damage. The reason we're able to farm the Giants Abyss hard team is purely because of this unit here. She is now essentially what is probably your Sigmaris or Akamami replacement in an early game account. Let's talk about Seal and why she's so good for beginners to build on their new accounts. So her S3 is an AoE pushback that applies continuous damage. Her S2 is also an AoE that has a chance of stun and does also apply continuous damage. And the S1 is a 2-hit attack break. Now, this unit has pretty decent AI so far from what I can tell. It prioritizes its AoE skills when there are many units on the board, and it pretty much doesn't use its S1 unless it is the only skill available. One of the biggest problems we've had for building beginner teams is the AI has been absolutely atrocious. Some of the units would sit there and use their S1 skill 5 times in a row, and it just wasn't good enough to make a consistent team. Between the AoE control from Veromos and Seal, you're able to easily get consistent control over the first 3 waves and make it to the boss stage. Once you get to the boss stage, the damage from your Naomi and your Wind Homunculus easily will carry you through to get the clear. So essentially to me, Seal is just a way for us to reduce our Devilmon consumption in the early game. A lot of people would go and build Sigmaris, and they would use him as your AoE CC control, but now all you have to do is go and 2A the Seal unit. She's also got a decently good kit for other things in the game. You're actually going to be able to use her in TOA, just like Sigmaris. You're also going to be able to use her in early game PvP, and AoE pushback and an AoE stun is honestly a pretty good skill set. The team seems to fail maybe once or twice in 30 runs, which is honestly really, really good for your very, very first beginner team. Before we go through the runes, I want to show you my event page just to show you that we really haven't done any rune farming just as of yet. The only thing we have done so far, which is the same as the previous video, is we've been collecting fight sets every day from the daily check-in, as well as we've only still collected the 2 fight sets from the first 2 rewards. We haven't collected any other runes from anywhere else. Even in the Summoner's Way, I haven't even collected any of the rune sets from clearing the B10s, because I just honestly was too lazy to go back and clear all these challenges, but we will eventually get onto that. Let's go over the monsters. The first one is Veromos, who's also going to be your leader skill. Veromos is on Vio Fight. I do quickly want to talk about this as well. The fight sets are not necessary for clearing this dungeon. However, what they will do is help speed it up. If you can make these units tankier so that they can survive, you're gonna get the same kind of thing. It just means that the dungeon run will be slightly longer. As you can see, the stats on my Prilea are pretty abysmal. And that is because I'm sacrificing stats to ensure that I get more damage out of my 2 damage dealers. The Vio set that we have on the Veromos was given to you for free except for this rune. However, this rune isn't necessary. You can just put anything on. As you can see here, we're heavily overcapping on accuracy, and speed is not really an issue. I don't even think crit rate is really an issue. The other thing you can do is if you don't have a crit rate slot 4 just yet on as a rune, you're more than welcome just to put this on Vio anything. We have very basic artifacts. They're actually pretty good ones. We've got some pretty good drops on him, which does help with the damage share for this run. moving on to the new queen of beginner Giants Abyss teams, Seal. Now, we have her currently on a Swift fight set. However, I think you're more than welcome to put her on the Despair set or pretty much any other set. The one thing I would say is I did like having her a little bit faster on this account. It just gave us a little bit more cycling to help clear through some of the trash waves. The fight set on this unit is average as hell, and the Swift set was given to us for free at the beginning of the game. Next up, we have Prilea. Just keep in mind that if you aren't able to get Homunculus into your team, you would probably take out the Prilea and you would put Bella D on here, the Light Inugami, and you would probably put Crow down here. And this team should technically still clear, it'll just be a little bit slower. But for our team, we're going to talk about Prilea and the Wind Homunculus. For now, we were unable to get a speed slot to fight rune just as of yet, so we ended up putting her on double fight focus. The stats on her are pretty poor, and we don't really have any useful artifacts on her just as of yet. The next unit is the Wind Homunculus. This wasn't doing enough damage without the Devilmons. It actually, I don't know what it is, but this unit, when it has 0 Devilmons, it hits like a wet noodle. But then when it gets Devilmons, it's like the most OP thing ever. It's such a weird thing. It was important that we got the crit rate to 85. I did find that some of the runs were failing because we missed our crit. This rage set is a combination of what you got from the Baeliger and Crow in the beginning of the game, as well as the Blade runes came from, I think, the Lapis, as well as another set you also get. As I talked about in my last video, it is very important to go and get at least the basic artifacts for your damage dealers. This is going to increase your damage output quite significantly in the early game, and later on, we're going to go farm that next level artifact to boost our damage output even more. The last unit we have is Naomi. The energy rune we have here was on the Vertihill in the event, as well as the rage runes came as the leftovers from the Baeliger and Crow teams. The first thing that we can still do is after increasing our account level, we're going to be able to increase our speed, our attack power, our crit damage, as well as our wind attack damage, and even the dark damage if we really wanted to later on. All of these things are going to help us increase the speed at which we clear this dungeon. The other thing that you need to take note of is we have no grinds, we have no enchants, our artifacts are absolutely garbage. So this team, once we start doing all of those boosts to the account, I see this team running at sub 1 minute, which is going to be absolutely fantastic for a beginner team. Most likely, I am going to start collecting some of these rune sets. The next thing that I'm going to be focusing on is building a solo R5 team. If you've reached up to this point, what I do recommend now doing is just AFK farming this Giants team until your account reaches level 50. Let's quickly talk about other things on this account that we were able to get. So one thing I wanted to mention was we were able to get our very first speed lead for RTA. The end goal for this account is to finish this current season of RTA, which I think ends in about 60 days. We're probably going to try to aim for around a C1 finish. If we get super lucky, there's the potential that we could finish C2. But for right now, I am definitely aiming for C1. So far, the Nat 5s that we have gotten are Wusa, Layla, Pisama, Douglas, and Fen Yang. This is kind of looking more towards a turn 2 kind of comp. However, getting the speed lead, which we got just today, is actually a good thing because it's going to allow a little bit more versatility in the comps that we can actually build. Our plan for today is now we're going to just sit in Giants for probably the next 24 hours or so, and we're going to collect as many runes as we possibly can. I'm going to do maybe a small guide in the next video on how to look for good runes, how to maybe build some of your more key units for a beginner account. If you're interested in that video, remember to give a subscribe so that you know when the video is out. And if you enjoyed the video, a like is always going to be helpful. That's going to be all for this one, guys. Peace out.